Well, this is my Martin guitar. I was wanted a Martin guitar. Not that I knew anything about them, but everybody said a Martin guitar. Oh my God, Martin guitar. That's it. You know, that's the Martin. That's it. Got to get a Martin guitar. So I always wanted one, and then I began to get exposed to them a little bit. Played a few that belonged to friends, and they were so far different from anything I had that it still was sort of like a magical thing. A Martin guitar, oh my God. Well, which one? You know, D28, D35, D45, God knows, I didn't know much about it. In fact, my first guitar was a classical guitar. And once again, I didn't know anything about guitars, but that was my guitar. And it was given to me by my father, who had gotten it from his wife, who was my stepmother, I guess. And she'd tried to, she'd had it custom made for her when she was living in Japan, and she just never really took to playing the guitar, so they passed it on to me. And what I could do with that guitar for the first year I owned it was this. More or less. Didn't know how to tune it. I didn't know anything. And one day I met a boy who said, "Oh, I can show you how to tune it." That's the only time I ever met that boy. He came over with a friend of my mother's, and he said, "Oh, you got a guitar?" I said, "Yeah, I want to see what I know how to do with it." He said, "Oh, I can show you how to tune it." So from that moment on, I knew how to tune a guitar, but I still didn't know how to play anything. In those days, at least in my circle, there weren't very many people who I knew who played the guitar, and there really weren't many good books. I got hold of a book by a guy named Frederick M. Node. It was just a general book about guitar and how to play the guitar. It had a lot of good information. None of it was much help to me. I practiced my scales like... Anyway, practiced that a lot, stretching my fingers out, but it wasn't much good. So then one day, I got a book that said if you can learn these 6 chords, you can play every song in this book. I don't know what the 6 chords were. I imagine it was C, F, G, A minor, D minor, and E, I'm guessing. In any case, I stayed up all night till my fingers were really, really sore. I mean, talk about sore fingers. That was my first experience with sore fingers. And I learned to play Puff the Magic Dragon and all these other Peter, Paul, and Mary songs. And I guess you could say I was off to the races, except I really wasn't off anywhere. Then one day I went down to New Orleans, and I saw a couple of street musicians. One guy looked like you'd think Mr. Bojangles would look. He is a gray-haired old African-American gentleman with a big polka dot bow tie on, and he was dancing on the street while his partner played a very simple tune on the guitar. It sort of went like this. So they were, those fellas are dancing and playing guitar, and people were just throwing money at them, and there was cigarettes and I don't know what all. They had a big pillowcase. I think it was a white pillowcase. Just full of stuff. Money, coins, cigarettes. I don't know what else might have been in there. And I was sort of captivated by that. I was kind of amazed that I knew enough to notice what chords they were playing. It was kind of a nice opportunity for me. And then the dancer just suddenly stopped dancing, looked around, his partner was gone. So the guy with the money bag had taken off. So he took off after him, and that was the end of my guitar lesson. I don't know whether the one fellow, the guitar player, had just decided to go take all the money for himself or what, but anyway. So in the meantime, I just had this classical guitar, and I suddenly sort of discovered an enthusiasm for flamenco guitar. I liked listening to Carlos Montoya, who was really popular in those days. He was on the concert tour, and he would come to LSU, they had a really nice performing arts theater there. So he'd come there every year or two, and I'd go over and get tickets and watch him play. And I learned to play sort of a malagueña thing, which probably everybody's heard. And a few licks I could pretty much put on about a 4-minute flamenco performance. And then that was the extent of my expertise in that area. Let's see how it sort of goes. Let's see if I can remember how that goes. Something like that. And I practiced and practiced and practiced, and I got kind of comfortable with that. The classical guitar sort of lent itself to flamenco, although really it should be a slightly different kind of guitar. It should be a cedar top and whatnot. And I actually got a chance to play that middle 4-minute piece of mine in front of a little audience, and I was so frightened and so excited that I performed, and people clapped and said, "Oh, that's great!" And I don't think I ever played any more flamenco after that. I got hold of a folk singer's guidebook about how to play songs, and so I learned a few things. Met a musician, and he told me that if I could learn to play 25 or 30 songs, I could, that'd be enough to be able to perform. So I spent quite a long time trying to work on a repertoire, and it wasn't easy going. I didn't really know what kinds of songs I wanted to play. I played pretty much anything that was easy, anything that was simple, anything that was in my vocal range, which wasn't all that much. And in the meantime, I guess I had been trying to study and learn to be an artist, a painter, with making pictures, and I was all excited about the Impressionists, because I guess everybody's excited about the Impressionists. And once again, I didn't know much about art, but I knew I wanted to paint, so I was studying that. And at one point, I I took everything I owned and put it on my back, and I had 2 suitcases and a backpack and a guitar and art supplies and everything, and off I went to New York to God knows what I wanted to do in New York, but somebody said, if you were interested in art, you need to go to New York. So hell, I went to New York, and I thought maybe I'd sell paintings on the street. So I got up next to the Metropolitan Museum and put all my watercolors up against a fence, and I guess that was like my first day there. And the police came and ran me off. They said, you can't do that. I sort of believed them, because they had just hauled a hot dog stand off for not having a license. Truck came up and just took the hot dog stand away. I really was kind of at a loss for what to do next. And I had my guitar with me, this same classical guitar, and I was playing it, and somebody threw some money in my case. I thought, well, okay, this will work. So I sort of stood up and got on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum and sang, and I don't know what all I did. This repertoire I've been working on, and I made some money, not a lot, maybe $3 or $2.75. In those days, a hot dog was 50 cents. So, and I think a Coke was 50 cents too, or maybe, yeah, I think so. So between for $1, you get a hot dog and a Coke. Maybe it was 75 cents for the hot dog and 25 cents for the Coke. I can't really remember, but for $1, you could get a meal. Next step up from that was a slice of pizza and a Coke, and then if you really felt like splurging, you'd get a falafel and a Coke. So I got myself down to Greenwich Village and found myself a little corner street and started playing my my music on a side street off from the heavy crowds, and not much action over there. So I look down the street and this lady comes walking along. She's she's early 30s, dressed up like a New York lady can be. I mean, she was looking good, hair done, nice shoes, the whole thing. She walks by and she puts a buck in my case and says, "Don't give up." So I didn't give up. The next money that came by me was I'm just going to call this person a bum for lack of any other description, but he had, kind of rough looking, and he came literally rolling up the sidewalk. And he had a dollar bill in his mouth. He spit it out into my case and then rolled off down the sidewalk. Well, I have no idea what that was about, but he said something to me too, which I can't recall. But I mean, he could walk. This is just his way of his performance art. So that was the beginning of my career as a street musician. But I'd go out and put in 3 or 4 hours standing in one spot, singing over and over and over again the same songs, and it's a good way to learn a song. You sing whatever they were, whatever those songs were, and you'd see people walking down the street, and you'd sing, and then they'd walk by, and you start the same song over again, ding, 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 and then maybe somebody would gather around you, and you'd keep playing, they'd put some money, and they'd take off, and maybe they'd stick around till you finish the song, then you'd have to sing another song. So I was making maybe $12, $15, maybe $20 a day And I wasn't making money like the experienced musicians, the ones who really sort of knew what they were doing, because I'd see little combos come up and in half an hour do a short set and make 40 or 50 bucks just like that. But I was happy enough to be able to survive for a while. I had a friend in New York I could stay with, so all I really needed was get enough money to eat and save enough money to be able to move on when I wanted to. I wasn't trying to succeed in the New York scene. I was just trying to get enough money to continue on, because I was flat broke when I got there. Good planning. So that's sort of how I started my professional career as a musician. I played on the streets. And after that journey, I went back down to Louisiana where I'd started, and I went down to New Orleans and had a little Volkswagen van that was somewhat set up for living aboard. So I spent some time down in New Orleans on the streets playing music. Got an artist license so I could legally get on the street and sell artwork. And then I'd play music in the evenings, in the afternoons, whenever. In fact, when I was up in New York on that first trip, I got kind of enthusiastic, and I went down to a place called, I think it's called Gertie's Folk City, which is where Bob Dylan debuted, or he played there regularly back in the old days in the 60s. And it was kind of a depressing place. There wasn't a lot of people there, just a few people in the audience, you know. And there was a long line of aspiring musicians out in line. And I remember very clearly that Bob Dylan had come out with his Slow Train Coming album, and all the folk musicians waiting in line to play at Gertie's Folk City were talking about, you know, God gave names to all the animals and all those other songs that were on that album. And they said, what happened to Bob Dylan? He's become a Jesus freak. But they were good songs. So I like that album. So I guess most of the music I was playing was kind of in the folk category. A couple of things I did were blues oriented, but I really wasn't focused on playing the blues. I was born down in Louisiana in the Cajun country, and I thought for a while maybe my roots were Cajun roots, but I really wasn't a Cajun, you know, just happened to be born there. So, but I read some books and tried to learn some Cajun songs, Jolie Blanc and a couple of others. Goodbye Joe, me got to go, me on my own. But it really, it's hard to pretend to be a member of a culture that you're not unless you really have a strong passion for it. And all the folk songs, I like the folk songs, but I really didn't have a particular handle on that. And I think I kind of gravitated toward the blues, well, for a couple of reasons. Basically, it's kind of easy to get into because the rhythm can be simple. The chordal, progressions, chord progressions can be simple. I mean, they can be complicated too, but it's mostly a pretty simple form, I guess, of music. And then again, I had kind of a feeling for the blues for some reason. One of the first records I ever owned was Billie Holiday. When I was 13 years old, I just listened to it over and over and over and over again because one thing is the only thing I had. Well, I had a Gene Krupa album, and I had a Tchaikovsky album. So between Tchaikovsky, Gene Krupa, and Billie Holiday, that's that's the way I spent that year, 13 and 14 years old, just listening to those songs over and over and over and over and over, probably thousands of times. And so I guess that kind of got into my system a little bit. And you know, back in the 60s, all that rock and roll music was based on the blues, whether I wasn't aware of it at the time, but since then I've kind of learned that, you know, almost all the rock and roll is basically just blues. So was it rock and roll? Blues had a baby, and they called the baby rock and roll. The blues had a baby, and they called the baby rock and roll. I think Muddy Waters said that. And if you get an electric guitar and try to play blues on it, it's going to begin to sound like rock and roll pretty quickly. And during those days in the 60s, I guess it was the bluesiest ones that had the most appeal to me. And Janis Joplin, just, I don't know, I was kind of in love with her, and I didn't know a thing about her except that album, that's Cheap Thrills, I think it was called. That was the first time I'd ever heard Summertime, I think, was when Janis Joplin did it. I guess I had a secret longing to be an important person in her life, but it didn't turn out that way. In any case, later on, when I began to be more interested in the blues, I understood, you know, where the appeal was for Janis Joplin. Part of it was just the music she chose. So I had this idea that blues was supposed to be this hard, belting, screaming, emotionally wrenching kind of music. And whenever I tried to play the blues, that's kind of the way I'd go. I quickly ran up head first against my limitations. So, but somewhere along the line, I ran across a Sonny Terry and Brownie McGhee album. It was a double album. It was a white album, the two records, and I had an old cheap record player. I had that. And that was I had that record and one other one. And so I spent that summer, I guess, somewhere around 77, I guess. I guess it must have been around 77, somewhere in the mid-70s, listening to nothing but that record all for the better part of a year, just over and over and over again. I guess I'm sort of thick-headed because it really, I just couldn't quite figure out what the hell they were doing. I mean, that, you know, even though blues is a simple form, it escaped me. You know, I just try. And in the process, I got some harmonicas, and I started working on playing harmonica to go along with trying to figure out what Sonny Terry was doing with his harmonica, which once again is to this day is still completely baffling to me. I don't know how he did what he does, but I can play a little bit of harmonica, but nothing like that. Let's see, what do we have here? Let's see if I can do a little harmonica. That'd be sort of that sort of thing. Then you have sort of anyway. So I was attracted to the blues, but I felt like I was just barely scratching the surface. Now, one time, I was living on a sailboat in Annapolis, a little tiny sailboat, this big. No, it was pretty small. I could sit cross-legged inside the cabin if I hunched down a little bit, you know. But if I sat up straight, I'd touch the ceiling. It was sort of like a floating pup tent. Anyway, it was a cold winter, maybe it was late fall, and I went ashore with my guitar, hoping to maybe play the guitar on the docks and get enough money for something to eat, because I really didn't have any money to speak of. And there were these two serious drinking older black men sitting there. And they wandered over to me and said, play some blues. I said, I don't know any blues. He said, sure you do. Everybody knows some blues. So the only thing I could think of that I could actually do was that little 2-chord thing that I'd learned down in New Orleans when I was 15 years old or 16 years old. And so I played that, you know, and they started dancing for me and passing the bottle around, and so I just played that for quite some time, 10 or 15 minutes, while we finished off their whiskey. Then they went out. One of them went off and came back with a bag of hamburgers and another bottle of whiskey, you know, a pint. So I got some food and some company, and I got to play some blues and got a little buzz on from drinking whiskey. And then eventually they wandered off. And it sort of, I felt like it validated me as a blues musician in some way. I don't know. It was something real that happened. It wasn't just me playing around with the guitar. But what really, I'm trying to think. I think that, so I went through trying to learn to play Cajun music and Cuban music. I was listening to a lot of music. I really wasn't finding my own genre of music that I felt comfortable with. But one day I bought this album, this CD of John Lee Hooker called Chill Out, which has got Carlos Santana backing him up on I think most of it, if I recall correctly. And it was just enough of a mix of hardcore, deep blues with the Carlos Santana Latin modern vision to let me really find a way into it. And so I got every John Lee Hooker album I could get my hands on, and I just listened and listened and listened. And I think that was a good it's not surprising that he kind of got through to me, because he's a solo artist, unlike Muddy Water, and Howlin' Wolf, and some of those other guys who play ensemble music. They got the harmonica player and the piano player and the guitar player and the bass player and the drums, and they're singing, but everybody's working together to create the sound. And John Lee Hooker it's just him. Now, he'll play with other people, but they play with him. He's not playing with them. He does what he wants to do, and it's nuanced and it's complex, but at the root, it's simple as can be. He'll just play one chord, and his sort of melodic runs and whatnot are kind of tricky. I can't say I ever really learned any of them, but it gave me a handle. So by this time, I'm getting to be in my 50s. I'm 68 now, and so once I got into my mid 50s, I began to feel like I could maybe begin to play some music. I'm still working on it. Now, this Martin guitar I got, this is a pretty expensive guitar. It's a D42. Which you may not really be able to see it that well, but it's got a little bit fancy work on it at the headstock. It's got inlaid, and it's got inlays on the neck and all this kind of stuff. But I'd been going to the guitar store for years and just playing guitars, and I never really found one that I just wanted to plunk down a lot of money for. But I did buy a Martin D1, which is kind of a really nice guitar. It was one of the first generation of machine cut guitars. They cut the neck and do a lot of the work with the computer navigated cutting tools. And it was like just a little over $1,000 for that. And so that was my first, steel string guitar that I had bought for myself. And that guitar and my classical guitar and some electric guitars and several other guitars I'd bought all perished in a house fire that I experienced somewhere around 1999, I guess. Had a little electrical short, and the whole house was gutted from fire. Eventually I rebuilt the house with the help of a friend of mine, but all the guitars were destroyed. Well, the D1, I managed to bring it back to life. And there was an ancient 1870 some odd Martin guitar that had been lent to me, which was pretty smashed up and ruined. But I also managed to bring that one mostly back to life again. In any case, I was without a guitar. So I still kept going to guitar stores, and one day I walked in and there were 3 different Martins hanging on the wall, and I played 2 of them, and no reaction. It was okay. And then I picked up this one, and it felt like the best guitar I'd ever played. And although I know there's a lot of great guitars out there, this one was good enough so I was willing to plunk down something like $3,700 like that. Give it to me, I'll take it. Just walked out with it that day. And so I still got this guitar. So I've had this guitar for since 2000, so 16 years. They say the more you can play a guitar, the better it sounds. There must be some way out of here, said the joker to the thief. There's too much confusion, I can't get no relief. But you and I, we have been through that, and this is not our fate. So let us not talk falsely now, the hour is getting late. No reason to get excited, the thief here kindly spoke. There are many here among us who think that life is but a joke. But you and I, we've been through that, and this is not our fate. So let us not talk falsely now, the hour is getting late. All along the watchtower, the princess kept the view, and all the people came and went, barefoot servants too. Outside in the distance, a wildcat did growl. Two riders were approaching, the wind began to howl. Well, I think I got some of the verse wrong there. About the same time that I was, shall we say, about the same time that I was discovering John Lee Hooker, I also came across Jorma Kaukonen, and he did woke up this morning, 4:30. Hesitation blues were knocking at my door. How long must I wait? Oh, can I get you now? Must I hesitate? Yeah, well, I ain't been to heaven, but I've been told St. Peter taught the angels how to jelly roll. How long must I wait? Oh, can I get you now? Oh, must I hesitate? Yeah, yeah. Well, it's ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Show me a woman that a man can trust. And how long must I wait? Oh, can I get you now? Or must I hesitate? Yeah, got the hesitation stockings, hesitation shoes. Got a hesitating woman singing me the hesitation blues. So I kept working on my repertoire. I had a pretty good business going with my pottery. Had a pottery business going, and I was working a crew of assistants. We worked around the clock, 7 days a week, making pottery and shipping it out. And I got a little bit of surplus money. That's how I could afford to plunk down cash for this guitar. And I bought some amplifiers and whatnot. For once in my life, I had a little money I could spend on some equipment. So I decided to form a band and try to get a gig and play a gig. So I got a gig, and I put together, well, I didn't put together, I found a few people willing to play along with me in spite of my obvious shortcomings. And we rehearsed for, several weeks, 6 weeks maybe. And I took off work for 6 weeks and did nothing but rehearse these 30 or 40 songs until I could play them without looking at the music written in front of me. And we gave our performance, did a couple of performances actually. And now that I think about it, that first performance, that was just me. It was just me. I worked for 6 weeks rehearsing, and then I did the show all by myself. And I did 2 sets, and it worked out okay. I mean, it was good. I felt good about it. I mean, I really went overboard. I recorded a CD, and I had T-shirts printed up, and I had posters, and I really did the whole promotional thing on this thing. And we packed the room of about 50 people, and it was a success, I guess. I didn't miss any, didn't forget any of the words, and I didn't fall down and faint out of terror. And but I didn't sell any T-shirts. I might have given away a couple of CDs. I'm not sure. I still have those CDs, and a lot of those T-shirts, I haven't worn them yet, and I wear them as much as I can. I mean, I've worn them out, a lot of them, but I still have a few that are pretty much new. And that was 15 years ago. But then I did start putting some bands together. I got some more gigs and put together a band, and we did a couple of performances, and some of those people quit, and I got some new people, and the drummer stayed with me through, I think, 3 versions of the band. And one day I said to the drummer, I said, I think that guitar player's got to go. And he said, well, I'm going too. So that was pretty much the end of that. The only person who really stayed with me through the whole experience was the bass player. And he'd probably come play with me if I started a band today, if he could squeeze it in. He's a good guy. Anyway, it was kind of a worthwhile experience, but in the end, I didn't feel real happy about the way it turned out. None of my bands really gel. I'll put it that way. I guess if I had found somebody to gel with, because I really think that's really the best part of music is the harmony with other people. But so far, it has not been my my fate in life, my good fortune to be able to harmonize with other musicians. The few times it's happened, it's been like magic. I get really excited. But usually when I find musicians who are good enough to play with me, they're too good. You know, they're kind of underwhelmed with my skills. There was a time when I was living in Baton Rouge. I had a little cheap apartment that was thrown up after World War II to house college students at LSU. I think I was paying $75 a month for this apartment in 1977, thereabouts. And across the parking lot there was another fella. I was on the second floor, and so was this other fella. And he, like me, he was an artist, and like me, he was playing music. And I'd be up there rehearsing a song in my room, and he could hear me, and when he'd rehearse his music, I could hear him. And we looked enough like each other that sometimes people would think I was him. And I don't know if anybody thought he was me, but so sometimes I'd really get into a song, and afterward I'd stop and I would imagine the applause, you know. But the only audience I had was this guy across the way. There is a house down in New Orleans, they call it Rising Sun. It's been the ruin of many a poor boy. God, I know I'm one. So mothers, tell your children not to do what I have done. Don't let them spend their lives in sin and misery in the house of the rising sun. Well, my mother, she was a tailor. She sewed those new blue jeans. And my father was a gambling man down in New Orleans, down in New Orleans. I'm going back down to New Orleans. My race is nearly run. Going to end my days beneath the sign of the house of the rising sun. In the house of the rising sun. Going to end my days beneath the sign of the house of the rising sun. There is a house in New Orleans, down in the Vieux Carré. It's been the ruin of many a poor boy. They've all left and gone away.